I woke up at exactly 12:03 a.m. to the sound of voices coming from the hallway. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard it clearly, my son's voice low and sharp. Make sure he doesn't wake up. Every hair on my body stood on end. The words drifted through the dark clear enough to slice through the quiet. Then came Laura's voice, softer but steady. Don't worry, it'll be over soon. I froze in bed, heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. My first thought was confusion. My second was horror. Were they talking about me? I slipped out of bed, moving toward the half-open door. The house was dimly lit by the glow of the kitchen nightlight. My son Michael stood near the counter, phone pressed to his ear, his back turned to me. We'll do it tomorrow night, he said. He won't feel a thing. My hand gripped the doorknob to steady myself. The man speaking so calmly about someone's death was my own child. My legs felt weak. For 34 years, I'd raised him to be kind, to stand for something. Now, I could barely recognize his voice. I backed away, returning to my room in silence. The air felt heavy, unreal. My reflection in the window stared back at me, pale, shaking, older than I'd ever felt. My mind spun through questions, but every one ended in the same unbearable thought: they wanted me dead. I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing through the panic, trying to reason with myself. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe he was talking about someone else. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me at dinner, that tight smile, the way Laura's hand had rested on his arm, as if to calm him. No, this wasn't my imagination. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling the steady thump of my heart, the same heart that had given out once before, 3 years after my wife Helen's passing. Michael and Laura had insisted I move in with them after that heart attack. You shouldn't be alone, Dad, Michael said. Let us take care of you. I thought it was kindness. Maybe it started that way. But lately I'd noticed small things. Locked drawers in the study. Whispered phone calls that stopped when I entered the room. The feeling of being watched in my own home. In the quiet, I looked at the framed photo on my dresser. Helen's smile still had the power to steady me. She used to tell me, Eddie, always trust your instincts. They've kept you alive this long. I stared at her face, whispering, what if my instincts are right this time? The room felt colder. I stood, walked to my desk, and opened the drawer where I kept my old notebook from my years as an engineer. The pages were blank now, waiting. On the first line I wrote midnight. Heard Michael say, make sure he doesn't wake up. Laura responded, it'll be over soon. Then I underlined it twice. By habit, I tried to think logically. I was 63, retired from oil engineering after 4 decades. My mind wasn't failing me yet. If they wanted something from me, money, assets, what could it be? Helen and I had built a modest fortune, enough to leave a family trust of $12 million. I thought of the insurance papers locked in my safe downstairs. Had Laura seen them? My breathing slowed. The words I'd overheard didn't sound like thieves plotting robbery. They sounded like people preparing for a death. My death. I glanced at the clock. 12:41 a.m. The house was silent again. Somewhere below, the refrigerator hummed, and I could hear the faint creak of the stairs cooling in the night air. I crept to the door, opened it slightly, and looked down the hallway. Their bedroom door was shut. I could hear nothing but my own pulse. I returned to the desk and opened my laptop. Years ago, Helen had shown me how to order small cameras online when she was learning photography. I found the same site, typed quickly, and ordered 2 motion-activated cameras. Delivery by morning. I shut the laptop and sat back, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving only exhaustion. My body trembled with the aftershock of fear. I couldn't tell anyone, not yet. Who would believe an old man accusing his own son of plotting murder? No. I needed proof. Engineers survive on data, not feelings. I took a deep breath and whispered into the dark. If they think I'm weak, they've already made their first mistake. At dawn, sunlight slipped through the blinds. I hadn't slept. Downstairs, I heard footsteps, the clink of dishes. I walked into the kitchen, forcing my voice steady. "Morning," I said. Michael looked up, startled for a moment before smiling. "Morning, Dad. You're up early?" His eyes flickered toward Laura, who poured coffee into 3 mugs. "You didn't sleep well?" she asked. I shook my head. "Strange dreams." Her smile froze for just a second. "Dreams can be dangerous," she said lightly, handing me a cup. I watched her stir cream into her coffee, slow, deliberate circles. Michael's phone buzzed. He checked it and left the room, muttering something about a client call. The kitchen felt colder the moment he was gone. Laura sat across from me, her gaze steady, her expression unreadable. "You should rest more, Edward," she said. "Stress isn't good for your heart." I forced a polite smile. "You're right. I'll be careful." When she turned away to rinse her cup, I noticed a faint stain on her sleeve. The reddish tint of spilled wine, maybe, or something else. My mind cataloged every detail. Engineers notice patterns, and patterns tell stories. After breakfast, I walked out to the porch. The air smelled of pine and morning rain. Across the yard, Michael stood near his car, talking on the phone again, his back to me. His hand moved in sharp gestures, frustrated. I couldn't hear words this time, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. He ended the call, opened the trunk, and placed a small metal box inside before closing it quickly. My chest tightened. Another note for the notebook. Small silver box. Hidden in car trunk. Friday, 8:12 a.m. As I watched him drive away, a strange calm settled over me. The shock had burned off, leaving clarity. Fear could destroy me, or it could guide me. And I'd learned long ago that panic solves nothing. Helen used to call it the engineer's curse, always needing to understand before reacting. She was right. But understanding had saved my life more than once. It would have to do so again. Back inside, I opened the safe in my study. Inside were the insurance documents, trust papers, and Helen's will. My hands shook as I flipped through them. I hadn't looked at these in years. The primary beneficiary was listed as Michael Langston. My eyes dropped to the secondary beneficiary line, Laura Langston. I exhaled slowly. So, that's what this is about. I put the papers back, locked the safe, and turned off the light. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels staged. My mind was already outlining the next steps: confirm the contents of my medicine, install the cameras, record everything. I could almost hear Helen's voice in the back of my head, calm and practical. Document first, Eddie, feel later. By afternoon, the doorbell rang. The package had arrived, 2 small black boxes, no bigger than a deck of cards. I held them in my hands, feeling their weight, the first real defense I'd had in weeks. I installed one in the kitchen facing the counter, the other in the hallway near the study door. When I was done, I sat on the couch and looked around. Same walls, same furniture, but everything felt different now. This wasn't home anymore. It was a crime scene waiting to happen. That night, I ate dinner with Michael and Laura. They talked about a weekend trip to Dallas, about work, about friends. I listened, smiled at the right moments, pretended to be tired. When they went upstairs, I waited 10 minutes, then checked both cameras. The red recording lights blinked quietly in the dark. Standing there in the half-light, I made myself a promise. Tomorrow, I whispered, I'll know if my son is planning to kill me, or if something worse is hiding behind him. And for the first time since Helen's death, I felt alive again, terrified. Yes, but alive, armed with purpose. Sometimes the only way to survive betrayal is to study it. Sometimes the quiet man everyone underestimates is the one already taking notes. The next morning I woke before the alarm, staring at the ceiling as dawn leaked through the blinds. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Downstairs I could hear voices, Michael and Laura talking over breakfast. I got up, washed my face, and tried to steady my nerves. My hands still shook slightly when I buttoned my shirt. I needed to look normal. The last thing I could afford was to make them suspect that I'd heard anything. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of coffee hit me first. Michael was reading something on his phone while Laura sliced fruit. They both looked up and smiled like any normal couple. "Morning, Dad," Michael said. "You're up early again?" "Couldn't sleep," I replied. Laura poured me a cup of coffee, her tone casual. "You really should get more rest, Edward. Stress can do terrible things to your heart." Her words sounded kind, but they cut like glass. She slid the mug toward me, her nails perfectly manicured, her expression perfectly calm. "We worry about you." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I know you do." Michael folded his paper and stood. "Big day. I've got to meet a client downtown." He kissed Laura on the cheek and gave me a polite nod before heading out. I watched through the window as his car disappeared down the street. Laura noticed my gaze and said, "He's been working too hard lately. I keep telling him to slow down." "Working hard is good," I said. "It keeps people focused." She gave me a look that lingered half a second too long. "As long as you know when to stop, of course." Something about her voice made my stomach tighten. After breakfast, I went out to the porch with my notebook. The sky was pale blue birds cutting across the power lines. For a moment, the calm almost felt real. But beneath it was that same cold dread. I wrote down what I had seen and heard last night, the conversation, the silver box in the trunk, the tone of their voices. I wrote in neat, deliberate handwriting the way I used to record data on oil rigs decades ago. Facts, not emotions. Facts don't lie. My mind drifted back to the years after Helen's death. Michael had been distant even then, blaming me for working too much while his mother was sick. He said I was married to the company. He wasn't wrong. I didn't know how to handle grief. I buried myself in work, in numbers, in blueprints. I told myself it was survival. But it cost me something I didn't realize. I was losing him. When he asked me to move in after my heart attack, I thought it was a chance to rebuild what we'd lost. I didn't see it for what it really was, a shift in power. Somewhere along the line, I stopped being the father and became the dependent old man. Every decision went through Michael and Laura. Every purchase, every repair, every appointment. At first, it seemed practical. Then, over time, it began to feel like management. That afternoon, while I was fixing a loose hinge on the porch door, I saw Michael outside on the phone again. He didn't notice me. "Yes," he said quietly. "The dosage is ready." He won't notice a thing. My chest tightened. Dosage. The word pulsed in my head. Laura appeared at the doorway, holding my bottle of nitroglycerin tablets. "I picked up your refill," she said sweetly. "Your doctor called earlier." I stared at the bottle. I didn't request a refill. Well, maybe they just wanted to be cautious. She placed it on the counter. "You're lucky to have people watching out for you." Her tone was light, but her eyes didn't match the smile. When they left for the afternoon, I took the bottle and walked next door to my old friend Frank, a retired pharmacist who lived 2 houses down. He opened the door, still wearing his gardening gloves. "Ed, haven't seen you in a while. What's up? I need you to check something for me," I said, handing him the bottle. "Don't ask questions yet. Just tell me if anything about these pills looks wrong." He studied the label, then unscrewed the cap and sniffed. "Nitroglycerin, sure, but let me run it under the spectrometer later tonight." You think they mixed it wrong? I just want to be certain, I said quietly. Call me when you know. He frowned but nodded. All right, Ed. But you look like hell. You okay? I will be. I lied. That night I sat alone in the living room, lights off, watching the security feed on my phone. The two small cameras blinked softly, recording everything. The house looked peaceful, but I didn't trust that peace anymore. At dinner, Michael asked Dad, "You're not feeling dizzy again, are you? You've been quiet lately." "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." Laura smiled. "You've always worked too hard, Edward. Maybe it's time to let go a little. Enjoy your golden years." Golden years. I hated that phrase. It always sounded like a polite way to say, waiting to die. I took a sip of water and noticed her eyes watching me as I drank. She smiled again when I set the glass down. After dinner, Michael came to my room. "Dad," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "you know we only want what's best for you, right?" "I know," I replied. "Sometimes you overthink things. You worry too much." "I've earned that right," I said softly. He smiled faintly. "Fair enough. But remember, Dad, sometimes holding on too tight can hurt more than letting go." He left before I could answer. I sat there in the silence, thinking of all the times I'd told him the same thing when he was a boy. Funny how lessons change meaning when you get older. Before bed, I checked my email. A message from Frank waited for me, time-stamped 9:47 p.m. The subject line read simply, "Ed, call me immediately." I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Ed, listen carefully. These pills, they're triple strength. If you took them more than a couple of days, they'd stop your heart cold." "Who gave you this prescription?" I felt my hand tremble. Laura picked it up. He cursed softly. "Then you better stop taking them. And you better find out who authorized this, because it wasn't your doctor." "Thanks, Frank," I said, my voice barely steady. I ended the call and sat in the dark, staring at the bottle on the nightstand. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger's. I turned the bottle in my hand, reading the label again and again. The handwriting on the refill by line wasn't my doctor's. It was Laura's. I'd seen her make notes on envelopes before, same loops, same slant. I locked the pills away in my desk drawer, then opened my notebook. Under the last entry, I wrote Day 2. Pills confirmed altered. Possible attempt on my life. Then I paused and added suspect motive insurance and inheritance. Outside, thunder rolled far off in the distance, a low rumble crawling across the Texas sky. I got up, pulled a blanket over my shoulders, and looked out the window toward the streetlight where rain had begun to fall. Across the yard, I could see Michael's car parked in the driveway, water sliding down its silver hood. Somewhere inside that trunk was the small metal box I'd seen earlier. I needed to know what was inside. I turned off the lamp, but my mind stayed sharp. Helen's voice echoed in my head again. "Trust your instincts, Eddie," I whispered. "I am." The next morning, I'd install one more camera. This one would face the garage. I'd record every word, every movement, every whisper. For now, I just wrote one final line in my notebook before closing it for the night. Day 2 silence is my shield. As I set the pen down, I realized that fear had changed. It wasn't panic anymore. It was focus. And that focus, born from betrayal, was the first step toward justice. The phone rang just after 7 in the morning. My heart jumped before I even checked the caller ID. It was Frank. His voice was tight, hurried. "Ed, I ran the tests. There's something you need to hear. Those pills you gave me last night, they're not standard nitroglycerin. The compound is triple strength. You take 3 of those and you're gone." I sat down slowly, gripping the edge of the table. Triple strength. Are you sure I'm positive? Whoever filled this prescription either made a mistake or did it on purpose. I called your doctor. He never authorized a refill. Ed, I don't know what's going on, but you need to be careful. Thank you, Frank, I said quietly. You may have just saved my life. When I hung up, my hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. My stomach churned. Fear settled in my chest like a weight, but beneath it something else began to stir clarity. The evidence wasn't just in my head anymore. It was real. I opened the drawer, looked at the small brown bottle. The white label gleamed in the morning light, Laura's handwriting still visible in the corner. I locked it away and took out my notebook. Day 3. Pills confirmed altered. Possible attempt on my life. I underlined the words, then closed the book. By noon, the doorbell rang. The delivery had arrived, 2 small black cameras. I unboxed them carefully, the way I used to handle precision tools on the rigs. One I placed in the kitchen, hidden between the cereal boxes angled toward the counter and medicine cabinet. The other I installed in the hallway, its lens small enough to blend into the wood grain. When I finished, I sat in my recliner and stared at the quiet house. The walls looked the same, but I no longer trusted them. Every shadow felt like an accomplice. The front door opened and Michael walked in talking on his phone. Yes, the papers will be ready by tomorrow. No, he doesn't suspect anything. His tone was confident casual. He looked up, saw me watching, and smiled. Hey, Dad, didn't hear you there. Who were you talking to? He hesitated only a second. Work stuff, the office. I nodded. Busy week always, he said, taking off his jacket. Laura wants us all to have dinner together tonight. She's making roast chicken. Sounds nice, I said, keeping my voice even. After he went upstairs, I opened my laptop and checked the camera feed. The kitchen image flickered to life. Clean counters, sunlight on the sink, nothing unusual. The hallway camera showed the faint outline of the study door. Everything looked ordinary. But ordinary could be a disguise. At 3 p.m., I saw Laura enter the kitchen. She looked around once, then picked up her phone. Her voice was calm. Yes, the insurance will pay double in accidental death. I've already checked. My breath caught. She paused, listening. He's getting suspicious, she said. Then we'll finish it soon. He won't wake up. My hands went cold. I watched her every move as she set the phone down, opened the cabinet, and adjusted the bottles inside. She smiled faintly at her reflection in the microwave door before leaving. I stopped the feed, replayed it twice to make sure I hadn't imagined it. The audio was faint, but the words were clear enough. Accidental death. Finish it soon. I downloaded the clip to a USB drive and placed it inside a sealed envelope. Then I wrote the date and time on the front in neat printed letters. Engineers trust data, not coincidence. That evening, as the sun dropped below the trees, I drove downtown to meet Grace Whitmore, my former company's legal consultant. She'd always been sharp and unflappable, someone who saw through paperwork like an X-ray. Edward, she said when she saw me, it's been years. What brings you here? I need some clarity on an insurance policy, I said, sliding the folder across her desk, and maybe some legal advice, hypothetically. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she scanned the documents. These signatures, some of them are printed, not inked. You didn't sign this change, did you? No. Then someone forged your consent. That's a federal offense. I leaned back in the chair, exhaling. I thought so. Who benefits from your policy? She asked. My son. And his wife. Grace's expression darkened. You need to take precautions, Edward, immediately. I already have, I said, sliding the USB drive onto her desk. That's why I came to you. Keep this safe. She nodded. You have a plan, working on it. When I got home, it was nearly dark. Laura was setting the table, humming softly to herself. Michael poured wine into glasses, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. I took my seat, forcing calm. Dinner began with small talk, weather work, neighborhood gossip. I watched them both carefully. When Laura offered to refill my glass, I covered it with my hand. No, thank you. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes flickered just for an instant. Suit yourself? Michael cut a piece of chicken and said, Dad, Laura thinks you should take a short trip next month. Maybe Florida. Get some sun. Sounds relaxing, I said. But I'm not going anywhere just yet. Laura's fork paused mid-air. Why not? I've got a few things to finish first, I said. You know how engineers are. We don't like leaving projects incomplete. There was silence for a moment before Michael laughed softly. You're still the same, Dad. Some habits are worth keeping. After dinner, I pretended to feel tired and went to bed early. I waited until I heard their footsteps fade upstairs, then slipped out of bed and checked the cameras again. The first video showed nothing unusual. In the second, the hallway feed Michael and Laura were standing close together outside the study door. Their voices were low but urgent. What if he finds out? Michael asked. Laura touched his arm. He won't. I'm handling it. By the time anyone asks questions, the papers will be signed and the account transferred. Transferred where? To Atlantic Trust. Keller's taking care of it. My jaw clenched. Keller Marcus. Keller was a name I hadn't heard in years. He'd been a consultant on an energy project I'd managed long ago, a man known for cutting corners and hiding money in offshore accounts. If he was involved, this wasn't just greed. It was a full-scale takeover. I hit pause, staring at their faces frozen on the screen. Two people I'd let into my home, trusted with my life, plotting in whispers less than 20 feet away. I transferred the new footage onto another drive and hid it beneath the false bottom of my toolbox. Then I turned off the computer and sat in the dark thinking. At midnight, I heard the faint creak of the floorboards outside my door. Someone was moving down the hallway. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped near the study. The sound of a key turning in a lock. Then silence. I waited 5 minutes before stepping out. The light from the study glowed faintly under the door. I peered through the crack. Laura was standing by the safe, her phone flashlight pointed at the dial. She was trying combinations, patient, meticulous. I backed away, careful not to make a sound, and returned to my room. My heart was hammering again, but my mind was calm. The footage would speak for itself. When dawn came, I called Grace. You were right, I said. Someone forged the documents. I caught them trying to access the safe. Edward, that's enough evidence to press charges. Not yet, I said. I want to know everything before I move. Who's involved, how deep it goes, then you're playing a dangerous game. I've played dangerous games my whole life, I said. This one's just personal. After hanging up, I opened my notebook again. Day 4. Laura confirmed working with Keller. Forged signatures. Attempted access to safe at 1:13 a.m. I set the pen down, exhaled, and looked out the window as the Texas sun began to rise over the rooftops. The light cut through the morning haze, revealing everything it touched. Sometimes truth hides in shadows. Sometimes you have to become the shadow to find it. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming control over my name, my work, my family. If they wanted a war built on deceit, I'd give them one built on evidence. Because when experience meets betrayal, it doesn't panic. It plans. Grace's office smelled of old paper and coffee when I walked in that morning. The blinds were half drawn against the Houston sun stripes of light cutting across the wall of law books. She looked up from her computer glasses perched low on her nose. You didn't waste any time, she said. I couldn't, I replied, setting the folder on her desk. Inside were copies of the trust agreement, my will, and the life insurance policy Helen and I had set up years ago. Grace opened the file, her lawyer's precision taking over. "You said you never signed this amendment." "Never," I said. "And yet the signatures are there." She ran her finger over the scanned page. "This isn't ink. It's a digital overlay. The date stamp's been edited. Someone forged it, Edward." I leaned back, feeling that old mix of anger and disbelief. I had to know for sure. Grace sighed. "Then let's talk about motive. Who benefits my son and his wife?" Her eyes met mine. "Laura." I nodded. "She's clever, calculating, and she knows enough about finance to hide her tracks." Grace studied the papers for another moment. "Do you realize what this means?" "Yes," I said quietly. "It means she's playing a long game." Grace folded her hands. "You mentioned a trust fund when you called. Tell me everything." I told her about the Langston Family Trust, $12 million Helen and I built over 40 years, split between our children, Michael and Emily. When Helen passed, I never finalized the transfer to Michael. I wanted to see him prove he could manage responsibility. He never knew Emily's portion still existed. Grace frowned. "And Laura, she knows," I said. "Somehow she found out. She's been digging through old records, maybe through my safe or my computer. She knows Emily is still a beneficiary." Grace sat back, exhaling slowly. "That explains the insurance changes and the forged signatures. If she removes Emily, she consolidates the inheritance." I nodded. "She's not just after money, Grace. She's eliminating obstacles. She wants control." Grace looked up sharply. "Eliminating, I think she planned to make my death look natural. Maybe even Emily's." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere downtown, fading into the distance. Edward, Grace said finally, "We need to move fast. You have to protect yourself and Emily. Does your daughter know any of this?" "No," I said. "We haven't spoken in years." Grace frowned. "Then it's time you reached out." Her words hit harder than I expected. "Emily, my daughter from my first marriage, had left home at 18. We hadn't talked in nearly a decade. She blamed me for remarrying too quickly after her mother's death, for choosing work over family. She had every right." Grace stood gathering the papers. "I'll freeze all modification requests tied to this trust. No one will be able to access it without your direct consent. In the meantime, gather every piece of evidence you have." "I already started," I said. "Cameras, recordings, phone logs." She gave a small, approving nod. "You always were thorough. Keep it that way." When I left the office, the heat hit me like a wall. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching the flow of traffic. The city looked normal, but the world I'd built was cracking beneath its surface. That afternoon, I sat in my study flipping through old photographs. Helen smiled up from every frame. She'd been the calm in every storm, the anchor that kept me steady. I whispered, "You'd know what to do." The phone buzzed. It was Grace. "Edward, I found something." The trust account was accessed 3 weeks ago from a new user, someone named Emily Langston. My grip tightened. "That's impossible." "Unless someone used her credentials," Grace said. "The access came from Houston." My mind raced. "Then Laura did it." "Or someone working with her," Grace replied. "Either way, they're trying to make it look like your daughter's involved." After she hung up, I sat back and stared at the ceiling. The pieces were falling into place. Laura wasn't just stealing. She was framing Emily to erase her from the trust. That night, I poured myself a small glass of whiskey, something I hadn't done in years. The ice clinked softly as I stared out the window. I could almost hear Helen's voice again, calm and firm. "Protect both of them, no matter what." I whispered, "I'm trying." Later, I opened my laptop and replayed the most recent footage from the kitchen camera. Laura stood at the counter, phone pressed to her ear. "Once he's gone," she said, "the trust clears automatically." Emily's record will be deleted. My breath caught. The call continued. Keller says we're good to go by Friday. Atlantic Trust is ready. Keller again. Her contact inside the financial system. It all tied together. I transferred the clip to a new folder labeled Primary Evidence and backed it up to an external drive. Then I called Grace. She answered immediately. I'm here. I have her voice on record, I said. She's talking about removing Emily's name. Grace was silent for a beat. Then we act. You'll need to update your beneficiaries immediately, put everything in your name, and assign me as temporary legal counsel on all matters of estate management. Done, I said. And Edward, she added, start documenting every word she says. In Texas, one-party consent recordings are legal. I smiled faintly. I know. I've already started. When we hung up, I looked around the study at the shelves lined with books. Helen loved the blueprints of the oil fields where I'd spent half my life. Everything I'd worked for was supposed to secure my family's future. Now, it was being used to destroy it. Around midnight, I went into the kitchen for water. The camera light blinked silently in the corner. I stood there staring at my reflection in the dark window. I looked old-tired, but there was something else in my eyes, resolve. Helen had always believed in patience, in fighting the right battles the right way. She'd say smart men don't raise their voices, they raise their evidence. I touched the counter, steadying myself. Time to start raising mine, I whispered. The next morning, Grace called again. Edward, there's more. Whitestone Legal, the firm. Laura's been using shares a client account with Atlantic Trust. Guess who signed off the last transaction? Marcus Keller, I said. Exactly. But here's the twist. Someone else approved it internally. The initials match Janet Langston. For a second, I didn't recognize the name. Then it hit me, Helen's sister, my sister-in-law. Janet had always been around the family business, offering advice after Helen died. She'd convinced me to delegate more control to Michael, to trust the younger generation. Grace continued. It seems Laura and Janet have been corresponding for months. I'm sending you the emails. I opened my inbox. There they were, threads of messages between Laura and Janet discussing trust amendments and reallocations. I sat back stunned. So, this isn't just betrayal by marriage. It's betrayal by blood. Grace's tone was grim. They underestimated you. You still have control of the master's shares. They can't complete anything without your final authorization. Then I'll make sure they never get it. After the call, I took out Helen's photograph again. Looks like your sister's in on it too, I said softly. Guess bloodlines don't guarantee loyalty. I spent the rest of the day closing financial back doors. I contacted my bank, froze the old accounts, transferred everything into a new structure under my control. I used skills I hadn't touched in years, precision, patience, foresight. Every transaction left a digital footprint I could trace. That evening, I poured another coffee and wrote in the notebook, Day 5. Evidence confirmed forged signatures, false access connection to Keller and Janet. Preparing new plan. Silence continues. As I finished writing, I looked out the window again. The sun was setting over Houston, painting the sky orange and gold. I realized this was more than a family betrayal. It was a test of everything Helen and I had built: our values, our patience, our faith in decency. They wanted control. What they didn't understand was that control had never left my hands. Tomorrow I would start the next phase. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. The morning after my meeting with Grace, the air felt heavier than usual. The sky over Houston hung low and gray, the kind of weather that made everything seem suspended between calm and storm. I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee untouched, staring at the wall clock as it ticked past 8. Upstairs, I could hear Laura's voice through the floorboards. Steady, precise, the tone of someone used to control. "Michael, the documents have to be printed by noon," she said. "Grace doesn't know everything yet, but she's getting close. If he suspects..." Her voice dropped, muffled by the ceiling. "If he suspects?" She still thought I was in the dark. That was good. I turned on the small tablet hidden beside the sugar jar and watched the live feed from the hallway camera. Laura moved down the stairs, phone to her ear, whispering as she reached the bottom. "No, Keller, the plan hasn't changed. We'll finalize after the transfer clears. Don't call this number again." She ended the call, then walked toward the study door, the one I'd left locked. She tried the handle, frowned, and moved on. I noted the time, 8:17 a.m., and jotted it in my notebook. Day 6. Laura, contact Keller, confirmed. Attempted access to study. The front door opened. Michael entered, carrying a stack of printed documents in a manila folder. "Here," he said, handing them to her. Everything Keller wanted. She glanced through the pages, nodding. "Perfect. I'll have Janet notarize them this afternoon." The name stung. Janet, Helen's sister. The woman who'd stood beside Helen's coffin, promising to protect this family. I stayed silent in the kitchen doorway, listening. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. "Are we sure this is necessary? He's been calmer lately." Laura's eyes sharpened. "That's what makes it easier. Calm people don't fight back." Michael hesitated. "He's my father, Laura." She sighed. "And soon, you'll be the head of this family. Sometimes leadership means making hard choices." Michael didn't respond. He set the folder on the counter and left the room. When the door closed behind him, Laura picked up her phone again and dialed. "Janet, it's ready. I will bring the copies to your office by 2. I clenched my jaw, then forced myself to breathe slowly. Every move they made was another piece of the puzzle falling into place. By noon, I was sitting in my car across from the downtown office building where Janet worked. The glass facade reflected a sky ready to break into rain. I watched Laura pull up in her Lexus, step out in a beige suit, and carry the folder inside. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like every other ambitious professional I'd known, confident, focused, certain of her intelligence. That certainty would be her undoing. Grace's voice came through the Bluetooth earpiece. "You're sure you want to do this alone?" "Yes," I said. "If Janet sees you with me, she'll know I'm not backing down quietly." Grace sighed. "All right. But record everything. Don't lose your temper." "I won't," I said, even though part of me wasn't sure. At 12:45, I walked into the lobby carrying my briefcase. The receptionist looked up. "Good afternoon, Mr. Langston. Mrs. Dean's expecting you." Janet's married name still sounded foreign. I nodded politely and took the elevator up to the 5th floor. Her office door was half open. She was alone, standing at her desk, reading the same manila folder I'd seen earlier. "You're early," she said without looking up. "I thought we should talk," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Of course. Family should always talk." There was something in her tone, condescending, almost pitying. I stepped closer. "You and Laura have been busy." Her eyes flickered. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You know exactly what I mean," I said quietly, placing my briefcase on the chair. "You forged my signature. You worked with Keller. You tried to erase Emily's name from the trust." Janet's composure cracked for a second before she forced a smile. "Edward, you've been under stress. You're imagining things." I took out my phone and played a short clip, Laura's recorded call from the kitchen. Her voice filled the room. "Janet will notarize the documents this afternoon." Janet's face went pale. You recorded her? I record everything I said. Helen used to say I over-documented. I guess that finally paid off. She sank into her chair. Edward listened to me. Laura convinced me it was for the best. She said you weren't well, that you wanted to close the trust early. Stop, I said. You're too smart to believe that. Her hands trembled. She said Emily was unstable, that you were giving her money to disappear. She lied. I see that now, she whispered. But I'm in too deep. Keller threatened me. He said if I didn't sign, they'd expose the offshore accounts. What offshore accounts? Her eyes filled with tears. The ones Helen left under my name. Tax shelters. She thought it would protect the family. I stared at her. You let them use Helen's accounts to fund their scheme. I thought I was saving us, she said weakly. No, I replied, my voice cold. You were saving yourself. The silence that followed was heavy. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. I took a step back, letting the weight of her guilt settle. Grace will contact you, I said. Cooperate and you might walk away with your license intact. Her eyes widened. You told the lawyer, I told the truth. I said simply. It was overdue. When I walked out of her office, rain was falling in thin silver lines against the windows. The city smelled of wet asphalt and betrayal. By the time I reached home, Michael was pacing in the living room. Where were you? He demanded. I had errands, I said. Laura emerged from the hallway, eyes sharp. You didn't take your medication this morning. No, I said, I didn't. She tilted her head. You really should. You don't look well. Maybe I'm just seeing things clearly, I replied. Her smile was thin. We're all under stress, Edward. Maybe you should rest. I think you're right, I said. Rest is important, especially before big decisions. Her brow furrowed slightly. What decisions you'll find out soon. I left them standing there, both pretending not to worry, and went upstairs to the study. I closed the door, turned on the lamp, and opened my notebook. The pages were filling fast. Each line felt like a small act of defiance, truth preserved against deception. At the bottom of the page I wrote, Day 6. Confronted Janet. Confession partial. Evidence expanding. Phase 2 begins. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I rewatched the camera footage rewound and took notes on timestamps, names, connections. Every clip was a weapon, every word a bullet. Around 2 a.m., I heard Michael and Laura talking in the hall. We can't wait anymore, Laura whispered. He's getting suspicious. Michael's voice shook. Then, what do we do? There's one last step, she said. The safe. Tomorrow night. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the sound of my heartbeat in the quiet. Tomorrow night. The words pulsed in my head like a countdown. I looked at Helen's photograph one more time. They think this is almost over, I whispered. They're right, just not the way they think. I closed the notebook and slid it into the drawer beside the loaded flash drive. Outside, thunder cracked again, echoing through the house. Tomorrow, the trap would close. And for the first time since that midnight whisper, I didn't feel like prey anymore. I felt like the hunter. The knock came just after 9. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a woman stood there in a gray jacket, her hair pulled back, her expression steady but hesitant. For a second, I couldn't find my voice. Then she said, "Hi, Dad." It had been 10 years since I last saw my daughter. Time hadn't erased the resemblance to her mother, the same calm eyes, the same deliberate tone when she spoke. "Emily," I whispered. "You came." She nodded, stepping inside. "I didn't plan to, but something's happening and I think you need to hear it from me before someone else tells you." My throat went dry. "What are you talking about?" She dropped her bag on the table and opened her laptop. Someone's been using my name to access the Langston family trust. 3 weeks ago, I got a fraud alert from my bank, multiple login attempts from Houston. When I traced the IP address, it came from this neighborhood. My heart stopped. From here? She looked at me. Yes. Your house. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. I moved to the chair and sat down, staring at her. Who else knows? No one, she said. I only came because the name linked to the attempt, L. Bradley, matches someone listed in a shared directory with the firm Atlantic Trust. Laura's alias. I felt my pulse quicken. Emily frowned. Dad, does that name mean something to you? I nodded slowly. It means you came just in time. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything pressing between us. Finally, she asked, Is it true what they're saying online, that you're under investigation for altering financial documents? I looked up sharply. Who told you that it's spreading on a few private investor forums? She said. Someone's painting you as senile, claiming you've been forging signatures to move assets. Laura again planting the story before her plan unfolded. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice steady. Emily listened to me carefully. You're in danger. Laura and Michael are trying to dismantle the trust and pin it on us. They've already falsified documents in your name. Her eyes widened. They think removing you will make the transfer cleaner. And if anything happens to me, they'll make it look like I tampered with the fund. Emily's face hardened. That's why someone used my credentials. Yes, I said. And now they'll come for you next. For a moment, she looked like she might laugh, not from humor, but disbelief. You're telling me my stepbrother and his wife are trying to kill you? And me? I'm telling you, I said quietly. They're desperate enough to try. She closed her laptop and sat back. Then what do we do? I hesitated, then told her everything, the cameras, the forged pills, the recordings, the meeting with Grace, and Janet's confession. As I spoke, her expression changed from shock to anger. They're manipulating every system you built, she said. But we can trace it all. I work in cybersecurity now, remember? I can track Keller's financial trail and match timestamps to Laura's communications. I looked at her, half relieved, half terrified. If you start digging, they'll notice. That's fine, she said. Let them notice. I smiled faintly. You really are your mother's daughter. She blinked, caught off guard. Mom would have done the same thing. No, I said softly. She would have done it smarter. We'll need to move quietly. The plan began that afternoon. Emily set up her laptop in the study, connecting through encrypted channels, while I monitored the house cameras. Every keystroke she made brought us closer to the truth. Around noon, she looked up. Dad, I found something. Laura's been routing transactions through a shell company called Whitestone Legal, same firm Keller used to launder money for his past clients. The payments move every 36 hours. They're trying to liquidate the trust piece by piece. How much so far? 200,000. I exhaled. They'll keep pushing until it's empty. Emily nodded. Not if I lock them out. She typed rapidly, rerouting the access permissions through a secondary firewall. There. Only 2 people can open it now, me and you. I watched her fingers move quick and confident. Pride and guilt tangled inside me. I should have called you years ago. She paused, her tone softening. You were grieving. I was angry. We both made mistakes. Still, I said you didn't deserve to be pulled into this. She smiled sadly. Neither did you. By evening, the house felt different, not safe, but alive, with purpose. I cooked dinner for the first time in months, while Emily worked in the next room. For a few moments, it almost felt like family again. We ate quietly. Between bites, she asked, "What happens when Laura finds out I'm here?" She already suspects something I said, but she doesn't know you've seen the evidence. Emily tapped her fork against the plate. Then we should make sure she shows her hand first. What do you mean? I mean, let her think her plan is still working. We'll collect everything we need, then we'll expose her when she least expects it. I stared at her, realizing how much of Helen lived in this young woman. The patience, the precision, the quiet fire. You've learned well, I said. She smirked. From the best. Later that night, while she slept in the guest room, I stepped outside to breathe the cool air. The neighborhood was still only the hum of cicadas and the faint glow of the streetlights. I leaned against the porch railing, staring into the darkness. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. Then I noticed the black SUV parked half a block away, the same model that had followed me 2 days earlier. My chest tightened. I texted Emily, "Stay inside. Don't make a sound." She replied instantly. "What's happening?" "Someone's watching the house." I zoomed in with my phone's camera capturing the license plate. The vehicle's lights flicked on for a moment, then turned off again. Whoever was inside wasn't leaving. I texted Grace, sending her the photo. Within minutes, she replied, "Registered to a private security firm hired by Whitestone Legal." "We're close, Edward. Don't engage." I slipped the phone into my pocket, whispering, "They think we're still waiting." When I came back inside, Emily was sitting on the couch, alert. "What did you see?" "Confirmation," I said. "They're watching, which means our plan is working." She frowned. "What plan?" "The one where they underestimate us." That night I sat in my study while she monitored the firewall logs. Around 11:42 p.m., she looked up sharply. "Someone's trying to breach the system again." I moved beside her. The screen showed a new IP address, same firm, different device. "They're desperate," she murmured. "They're trying to delete the evidence. Can you block it?" She smiled faintly. "Already did." We waited as the digital war played out, logins, denials, repeated failures. Then finally the intrusion stopped. The clock struck midnight. Emily leaned back in her chair, exhausted. "They'll know I'm here now." "I know," I said. "And that's exactly what we want." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain began to patter against the windows. The storm had returned just like the night this all began. Emily turned off the monitor and looked at me. "Dad, if things get worse, if they come after us, what will you do?" I met her gaze. Whatever a father has to do. Protect his family, even from itself. She smiled faintly. Mom would have liked hearing that. "Your mother always believed justice came, eventually," I said. "She just never lived to see it." Emily reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "Then maybe it's our turn." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the roof. The cameras blinked silently, recording everything. As I stood to close the blinds, I caught a flash of movement near the SUV. A man stepped out, speaking into a phone. His face was shadowed, but I caught a glimpse of his ring, a silver crest, with the initials M.K. Marcus Keller. I whispered, "He's here." Emily's eyes widened. "Then we're out of time." I nodded slowly. "Yes, but so is he." The storm roared outside as I switched off the lights, the two of us sitting in the dark, waiting. Sometimes silence isn't fear. It's preparation. And tonight, silence was our weapon. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. Sheets of water slid down the windows, blurring the world outside. Emily sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, hair pulled back, her eyes locked on lines of code streaming across the screen. "They tried again at 3:47 a.m., she said without looking up. "Different IP, same network. They're desperate." I poured coffee into 2 mugs. Desperate people make mistakes, I said, sliding one toward her. She took it, nodded. Then we make sure they make one big enough to bury themselves with. The words caught me off guard. Strong, measured, but with something fierce beneath. I saw Helen's fire in her. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. It was Grace. "Edward," she said, "I've got something. The offshore logs Keller used last night show an attempt to move funds, not from your trust, but from an account in Emily's name." Emily froze. "My name?" "Yes," Grace said. "They're trying to stage it like you transferred the money to Atlantic Trust. It'll look like you're laundering funds for your father." Emily's hands clenched. "They're framing me." I met her gaze. "They want to destroy us both." Grace's voice hardened. "We can't let them get ahead. We'll set a digital trap. If Keller or Laura makes another transfer, we'll have a full trace every keystroke, every location." "I'll help," Emily said. "Just send me the protocol." Grace hesitated. "Be careful. If they realize you're tracking them, they might try something worse." "Let them try," I said. "We'll be ready." After the call, the house fell quiet, except for the sound of the storm. Emily worked steadily, building the firewall and the bait transaction Grace had suggested. I watched her fingers move over the keyboard, precise and calm. When she finished, she sat back. "Done. The system's live. If they touch any of the trust accounts again, we'll know in real time." I nodded. "Good. Now we wait." We didn't have to wait long. Around noon, Michael came home early. His clothes were soaked from the rain, his face pale. "Dad, we need to talk," he said. Emily looked up sharply. "You shouldn't be here." He blinked, surprised to see her. "Emily, what the hell are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing," she said coldly. Michael glanced between us, then lowered his voice. "I need to warn you. Laura's not who you think she is. She's working with someone Keller, I think, and they're planning something big." I leaned back, studying him. "You're a little late, son. We already know." He froze. "You do? I've got the evidence," I said. "Recordings, documents, forged signatures. I even have Janet's confession." He looked shaken. "Then you know what she's capable of. She told me last night that by the end of the week, everything would be resolved. She said we'd be free." "Free from what?" Emily asked. He hesitated. "From you, Dad." Emily's chair scraped the floor. "You knew." Michael shook his head violently. "No, I swear I didn't. I thought she meant legally, like she'd arranged some settlement. I didn't know she was planning." He stopped himself. "Planning what I asked," quietly. He swallowed hard. "She met Keller in person. He's here in Houston. They said something about finishing what they started." I exhaled slowly. "Then we don't have much time." Emily folded her arms. "Why are you telling us this now?" "Because I made a mistake." Michael said, his voice breaking. "I let her convince me you were slipping, that you'd lost control. But last night she mentioned the word accident. That's when I realized she wasn't talking about retirement or inheritance. She was talking about killing you." He looked at me, tears forming. "Dad, I don't know how to fix this." I stared at him for a long moment. I saw fear, guilt, confusion, but also something real, something human. Maybe it wasn't too late for him. "You start by helping me," I said. "We'll set a trap tonight. I need you to make sure Laura believes I'm taking my medication again. Don't let her see anything's changed." He nodded quickly. "I can do that." "Good," I said. "Because tonight the trap closes." After he left, Emily turned to me. "You trust him?" "Not yet," I said. "But I trust what fear does to a guilty man." She looked unconvinced, but didn't argue. Instead, she checked her laptop again. Firewalls stable. The beta accounts in place. What happens when Keller takes it? I asked. He'll trigger a digital marker that pings Grace's server. Once he moves the funds, we'll have proof of theft and location. He won't be able to hide again. I nodded. And Laura, she'll follow him straight into the evidence trail. It was nearly evening when the first alert came. Emily's laptop beeped a red notification flashing on the screen. "They're in," she said. "Keller's accessing the beta account from a remote server." "Trace it," I said. She worked fast, eyes darting across the lines of code. "Got it Midtown, near the old industrial park. He's using a secure VPN, but Grace will crack it in minutes." The phone buzzed again. It was Michael. His voice was tight whispering. "Dad, she's leaving. She said she has to meet Keller. She's taking the silver case." "The same one from the trunk?" I asked. "Yes." "What's in it?" "Evidence," I said. "Of her own crime." I looked at Emily. "We're going to end this tonight." She nodded. "Grace already knows the address. She's contacting federal agents." As we drove through the rain-soaked streets, Houston looked ghostly under the dim yellow streetlights. The windshield wipers struggled against the storm, and every flash of lightning seemed to sharpen the tension inside the car. "You should have called the police sooner," Emily said. "Not yet," I replied. If I'd gone to them without proof, they'd have thought I was paranoid. Tonight, they'll see everything with their own eyes. When we reached the industrial park, the rain had turned to mist. The lot was empty except for a single car, Laura's Lexus. Its headlights cut through the fog like two staring eyes. We parked a distance away. Through the haze, I could see her silhouette standing beside Keller, handing him the silver case. Emily's laptop pinged again. "Transfer complete," she whispered. They took the bait. I pulled out my phone. "Grace, it's done. Agents are 2 minutes out," she said. "Stay out of sight." But before I could respond, Keller turned, suddenly scanning the darkness. His eyes landed on us. "Run," I said. We ducked behind the car, just as Keller shouted, "They're here." Laura's voice followed, sharp and panicked. "You said no one would find us." Then the sound of sirens filled the air, faint at first, then closer, louder. Blue and red lights cut through the fog. Keller dropped the case and bolted toward the back of the lot. Laura froze, caught in the beams. "Hands where we can see them," a voice yelled. Federal agents swarmed in, surrounding them. One officer picked up the silver case, opening it. Inside were forged contracts, USB drives, stacks of cash, all the proof we needed. Emily exhaled beside me, shaking. "It's over." But I didn't answer. I was watching Michael's car pull into the lot. He got out pale and wide-eyed and looked at Laura. She turned toward him, her voice breaking. "You called them?" He didn't answer. Laura's expression twisted into something cold and unfamiliar. "You ruined everything." When they led her away in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. Her face was blank, but her eyes burned with hatred. "You think you've won?" she said. "You have no idea who you're really fighting." The words echoed long after the sirens faded. Back at the house, Emily sat on the couch, her laptop closed, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "It's done," she said quietly. "Not yet," I replied. "There's still someone above Keller, someone who gave the order." She frowned. "Who?" I stared out the window into the rain. "We'll find out soon enough." Emily stood, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Dad, tonight you saved us. That's enough for now." I looked at her, at the strength in her face, the steadiness of her gaze. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Maybe I said softly, "But peace doesn't mean safety." Outside, the storm began to break apart, lightning fading into quiet drizzle. I thought of Helen again, of everything she'd told me about patience and truth. She used to say that lies always leave footprints. You just have to wait for the rain to stop to see them. And tonight, as the storm faded, I knew the real footprints were just beginning to appear. The next morning, sunlight broke through thin clouds, casting a pale glow across the front yard. The storm had passed, but the air felt heavy with something unfinished. Emily sat on the porch steps, scrolling through her laptop. She looked up as I came out with 2 mugs of coffee. "They've frozen the Atlantic Trust accounts," she said. Grace confirmed it. "Keller's assets, Laura's shell companies, everything's on hold." I handed her a mug and sat beside her. "Then they're cornered." She nodded. "But that's the problem. Cornered people don't stop. They claw." The words echoed in my mind. I'd seen it too many times. When greed meets desperation, it never ends cleanly. Inside, the phone rang. Grace's voice was brisk but controlled. "Edward, we need to talk in person. Keller's not the top of this. There's another layer." "Another?" "Yes," she said. "A controlling shareholder at Atlantic Trust who authorized every illegal transfer, someone named Richard Alvarez. But the real twist, he's tied to Whitestone Legal through a secondary client, Janet Langston." My chest tightened. "Janet again." Grace hesitated. "We think she used Helen's old offshore accounts to mask the transactions. She's deeper in than we realized." I gripped the phone tighter. She was helping them from the start. "Worse," Grace said. "She may have been the one who connected Laura and Keller in the first place." The silence stretched. I could hear Emily typing inside, unaware of what I'd just learned. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Proof," Grace replied. "Something tying Janet directly to Alvarez. If we have that, we can end this for good." After hanging up, I returned to the kitchen. Emily was at the counter reviewing data logs from the night before. "Grace found something," I said. "It goes higher than Keller." Her brow furrowed. "How high? Far enough that this isn't just about money. It's about control over everything Helen built." Emily's hand stilled on the keyboard. "And Janet." "She's part of it," I said quietly. For a long moment, Emily didn't speak. Then she closed the laptop and looked at me with calm resolve. "Then we take it apart piece by piece, just like Mom would have." We spent the afternoon in the study tracing email trails and account authorizations. Emily found encrypted messages between Janet and Alvarez, short-coded exchanges using phrases like renewal cycles and legacy realignment. She cracked one of them, revealing hidden attachments that outlined asset reallocations under Janet's approval. When she showed me, my throat went dry. "She used Helen's foundation as a cover," I said. Every transaction listed under philanthropic investment was a laundering channel. Emily nodded. "She funneled millions into Atlantic Trust and back out to Whitestone Legal. It's genius in a disgusting way." "She built her safety net while pretending to protect ours," I muttered. Emily leaned closer. "We can use this. If Grace gets these files, she can tie Alvarez directly to Janet. That's the smoking gun." "Then send it," I said. "I will," she replied. "But there's one problem. I just got a system alert. Someone's trying to delete the source documents." My pulse quickened. "From where? Janet's office?" She turned the laptop toward me. A small red warning blinked across the screen. Remote deletion attempt detected. Emily started typing furiously, her jaw set. "If she wipes the originals, our copies won't be enough to prove intent." "We need the raw data." "Can you stop it?" I asked. "I can delay it. But if she realizes I'm intercepting the connection, she'll cut power to her server. Then we make her hesitate," I said. "Call Grace. Tell her to keep Janet occupied." Emily nodded and dialed. "Grace, it's Emily. We've got her deleting files right now. Stall her. Do whatever it takes." Through the faint speaker, I heard Grace's calm voice. Understood. Emily kept typing, her fingers a blur. Almost there. 2 more files. Then suddenly the power flickered. The laptop screen dimmed for a second before recovering. She's trying to cut the grid remotely, Emily said. She knows we're in. Can you finish 1 minute? I stood by the window, watching the road outside. A black sedan rolled past slowly, the kind of car that doesn't belong in a quiet neighborhood. She's sending someone, I muttered. Emily didn't look up. 30 seconds. I moved toward the drawer in the hallway and retrieved the small handgun I hadn't touched since my days on the rigs. It wasn't loaded for war, just reassurance. Emily hit enter. Got it, she said. Full backup transferred to cloud storage. Grace has everything. Relief hit me like a wave. You're your mother's daughter, all right? But before I could say more, the doorbell rang. We froze. I gestured for Emily to stay back. When I opened the door, rain was starting again, thin and cold. A man stood on the porch, clean suit, umbrella, calm smile. Mr. Langston, yes. My name's Peter Lowell. I represent Atlantic Trust's Compliance Division. We're conducting a review of recent transactions. I was hoping we could speak. I studied him. You can speak from there. He chuckled politely. Of course. We've received some concerns about unauthorized access to our systems. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Would you behind me? I felt Emily step quietly into view. Actually, she said, we know everything about it. Peter's expression shifted slightly, the faintest crack in his calm. Then I'd appreciate your cooperation in resolving it. I glanced at Emily. Her eyes told me what I already suspected: this man wasn't compliance. He was cleanup. Grace will be in touch, I said, starting to close the door, but his hand shot out, stopping it. Mr. Langston, I insist. The sound of approaching sirens cut him off. His jaw tightened. We'll talk again, he said, stepping back into the rain before turning to leave. Emily exhaled. Grace sent them, I nodded, right on time. Within minutes, Grace arrived herself, stepping out of a government sedan with 2 federal agents. Janet's been detained, she said, her tone a mix of triumph and exhaustion. She confessed to coordinating the transfers. Alvarez is next. Emily leaned against the doorway, relief flickering across her face. Then it's over. Grace shook her head. Not quite. Keller's missing. And if Janet's telling the truth, he has one more asset hidden, something Helen left behind that none of you knew about. I frowned. What asset? Grace opened her folder and handed me a photocopy. It was a deed property in Fort Worth signed by Helen, 30 years ago co-owned with Janet. This might be where Keller's been moving the funds. Emily took the paper, scanning it. A shell property. If Keller's using it, he's converting the money into real assets. Grace nodded. And if he's still in Texas, this is where he'll be. I felt the familiar weight of decision settle over me. Then, that's where I'm going. Grace stepped forward. Edward let us handle it. No, I said. He started this in my house. It ends with me. Emily placed a hand on my arm. Then I'm coming with you. I met her eyes. No arguments, none, she said. You'll need someone who understands the tech, and someone who's already been used as bait. The rain picked up again, tapping against the porch roof. Fine, I said. We go tonight. Grace sighed. Then at least take this. She handed me a small recorder. If you're going to face Keller, I want his words on record. We'll need them. I slipped it into my pocket. We'll bring back proof. As Grace and the agents left, Emily turned to me. Dad, what if he's armed? Then we make sure the truth hits harder, I said. The night closed in around us. By the time we packed and left Houston, the roads shimmered under the rain. The sky lit with distant lightning. Emily's laptop glowed faintly in the passenger seat as she monitored Keller's digital movements. Every mile we drove, took us closer to Fort Worth, closer to the man who'd pulled the strings from the shadows. And somewhere deep down, I knew this wouldn't just end with Keller's arrest. There was something else waiting buried with Helen's name on it. Something Keller thought he could own. But he'd forgotten one thing about quiet men like me. We don't shout for justice. We build it. The rain followed us all the way to Fort Worth. It came in waves, soft at first, then heavy enough that the windshield wipers couldn't keep up. The drive was quiet, except for the rhythmic slap of rubber against glass and the steady hum of the engine. Emily sat beside me watching the GPS map glow faintly in the dark. "That's the address," she said. "The property Mom co-owned with Janet." The coordinates led us to the edge of the industrial district, an old warehouse that looked abandoned from the outside, its walls streaked with rust and rainwater. The only light came from a single window upstairs. Keller was here. I could feel it. We parked behind a line of old shipping containers. Emily checked her laptop. Grace said the agents will be 10 minutes behind us. 10 minutes might be all he needs to disappear, I said. She looked at me, eyes steady. Then we don't wait. We slipped inside through a side door, the hinges groaning softly. The smell of oil and damp concrete filled the air. Inside, the place was half-empty old crates stacked against the walls, water dripping from a leaky roof. And then faintly, we heard voices. Laura's voice came first. "You said it was safe here." Then Keller, calm and collected. "It was until your husband started growing a conscience." Emily froze. "She's here," she whispered. We moved closer, staying behind a rusted metal beam. Through the crack between two crates, I saw Laura standing near a table piled with files and open laptops. Keller leaned over one of them, typing quickly. "I told you," Laura said, her voice trembling now. "I can fix this. We can still disappear before they—" Keller slammed his fist on the table. "It's over, Laura. Your sister-in-law confessed your accounts are frozen, and the feds are crawling all over my people. You were supposed to control the family, not drag them into this mess." Laura took a step back. "You don't talk to me like that. I made this happen. Without me, you'd still be skimming pennies off client accounts." "Without you," Keller said, leaning closer, "I wouldn't be hunted." The tension in the air felt electric. I motioned for Emily to stay back, but she shook her head and whispered, "Dad, the files, if we can copy them, we'll have everything." She opened her laptop and connected to the nearby Wi-Fi signal. The warehouse network popped up instantly. "He's using an unsecured router," she murmured. "I can pull everything he's uploading." I kept my eyes on Keller. He grabbed the silver case, the same one from the night of the sting, and opened it. Inside was a stack of hard drives and cash. "This is what's left," he said. "It's not much, but it's enough to start over." Laura crossed her arms. "Start over where you said the Cayman account was clean." "It was," Keller replied. "Until your father-in-law got his lawyer involved." "You really didn't know he still had those shares, did you?" She froze. "Shares?" He laughed bitterly. "You thought you were pushing an old man out of a desk job. You were trying to steal from the majority shareholder of Piedmont Energy Bank." Laura's face went white. "You're lying." "Am I?" Keller said. "The same man you wanted dead is the one who owns the board you were planning to replace. You tried to rob a man who could buy and sell this entire operation twice over." I stepped out from behind the beam. "That's the first true thing you've said all night." Laura spun around, eyes wide. Edward Keller's hand went for his jacket. "Don't move," I warned, leveling my voice calm but firm. "You're done, Keller," he sneered. "You think you've won? You have no idea how deep this goes." Emily moved beside me, laptop in hand. "Deeper than you think," she said, "because I just downloaded every account you touched. The FBI will have it before sunrise." For the first time, Keller's confidence cracked. "You stupid!" The sound of sirens cut through the storm. Red and blue lights flashed outside the warehouse windows. Keller turned, eyes darting. "You called them." "Not me," I said. "You called them yourself when you logged into a federal tracked account." The door burst open. Agents stormed in, shouting commands. Keller grabbed Laura's arm and yanked her toward the back exit. "Move!" "Dad," Emily yelled as I took off after them. My shoes hit the wet concrete, splashing through puddles as I chased them toward the loading dock. Outside, rain poured harder. Keller shoved Laura forward, trying to use her as a shield. "Stay back," he shouted. "I'll kill her." Laura struggled, screaming. "You said you'd protect me." "You were leverage," Keller snapped. I stopped a few yards away, raising my hands. "You don't want to add murder to your list, Keller. It's over." He shook his head, his voice trembling for the first time. "You don't get it, old man. People like me don't go to prison. We vanish." I took a step closer. Not this time. Behind him, Laura twisted free and stumbled away. Keller turned his head for half a second, just enough for me to lunge forward. I hit him hard, the impact knocking the gun from his hand. It skidded across the slick pavement, clattering to a stop near the edge of the dock. We grappled for balance, rainwater soaking through our clothes. Keller swung wildly, catching my shoulder, but I'd spent a lifetime in harder fights than this. I shoved him back, sending him sprawling near the edge. The agents were shouting again, their flashlights slicing through the rain. "Stay down," I yelled. But Keller reached for the case instead. "You'll never keep it," he shouted, pulling it open. The money inside scattered into the windbills, plastering against the wet ground. Then his foot slipped. The last thing I saw was his face, shocked disbelief, before he fell backward into the rushing water below. The current swallowed him in seconds. The agents reached me, pulling me away from the edge. One of them shined a light over the water, but Keller was gone. Laura stood nearby, drenched, trembling. When the agent tried to hand her a blanket, she shoved it away. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "It was supposed to be simple. Just money." I looked at her, the exhaustion finally catching up. "You traded your soul for a balance sheet." She met my eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "You won, Edward. But you'll never forgive me." "You're right," I said. "I won't. But I'll survive you." The agents took her away. Emily appeared beside me, soaked and shaking her face, pale but composed. "Dad," she said softly, "it's over." I looked out at the dark river. It's never really over. But it's enough. She took my arm, steadying me as the adrenaline drained from my body. "Grace said the files you sent exposed Alvarez, too. The board's moving to seize everything tied to him." I nodded slowly. Then justice caught up. As the agents loaded the evidence into their vehicles, I caught one last glimpse of the silver case half open, its papers soaked and curling in the rain. Money lies ambition, all of it washing away. Emily squeezed my hand. Mom would have been proud. I smiled faintly. She would have told me I took too long. We walked toward the car sirens fading behind us. The storm had finally broken. The night air smelled like wet earth and new beginnings. Before getting in, I looked back once more at the warehouse. Its windows dark now, its secrets emptied. "Let's go home," I said. Emily nodded, starting the engine. The road ahead glistened under the streetlights, clean and silent. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The truth had cost me everything. But it had given me one thing. I thought I'd lost forever, the feeling of being alive again. And as we drove toward the dawn, I realized Helen had been right all along. Justice doesn't come with noise or glory. It comes quietly like the first light after the longest storm. Morning came pale and quiet over Houston, washing away the storm, but not the memory of what it left behind. I sat on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders, watching the sun rise through the dripping oak trees. Emily was still asleep upstairs. She needed the rest. For the first time in weeks, there was no fear in the house, just silence. Not the kind that hides danger, but the kind that follows it. Grace arrived just after 8, carrying a folder tucked under her arm. She looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from too many nights without sleep. "It's official," she said. "Laura's agreed to a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. The DOJ wants Keller declared dead, but until they recover a body, it's technically open." I nodded. He won't surface. Men like him don't know how to live without control. Grace sat across from me. "You did the right thing, Edward. Everything you gave us, the recordings, the emails, the witness accounts, it's airtight. The board voted last night to restore all your holdings and transfer management of the Langston Trust back under your authority." I looked out across the yard. The azaleas were blooming pale pink against the damp soil. "Funny," I said. "All that fighting just to end up where I started." Grace gave a faint smile. "Not quite. You've got your family back." I thought of Emily asleep upstairs, of the way she'd stood beside me in that warehouse, fearless and focused. "Maybe," I said. "Or what's left of it." Grace hesitated, then slid a document across the table. "There's one more thing. Janet Langston filed for plea negotiations. She claims Keller coerced her into laundering Helen's old accounts." I picked up the paper but didn't read it. "And do you believe her?" Grace shook her head. "Not entirely, but her cooperation will make sure no one at Atlantic Trust ever tries something like this again." "Good," I said. "Then let her deal with her own guilt." Grace stood. "You're free now, Edward. You could retire, travel, disappear if you wanted. No one would blame you." I smiled faintly. "Disappear? I think I've spent enough time being invisible." When she left, I went inside and poured myself a second cup of coffee. The house was quiet except for the soft creak of the stairs as Emily came down. She was barefoot, hair pulled into a loose braid, wearing one of her mother's old sweaters. "Grace left already?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "She wanted you to know the investigation's over." Emily leaned against the counter. "Then what happened? What happens now?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out." She smiled softly. "You could take that trip Mom always talked about. The one to Oregon, remember? She wanted to see the coast." I looked at her, surprised. "You remember that?" "Of course, I was 12. She said it was the only place she ever wanted to grow old." I nodded slowly. "Maybe I'll go. Maybe we both should." Before she could answer, my phone buzzed on the table. It was an unknown number, local. I hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Langston," a man's voice said. "This is Detective Sandoval with Fort Worth PD. We've recovered something near the riverbank. You should probably see it." I froze. "Keller." "Yes, sir." "What's left of him?" "We'll need you to make a formal statement." When I hung up, Emily was watching me. "They found him." I nodded. "It's over for real this time." We drove back to Fort Worth that afternoon. The river was calmer now, sunlight breaking over the muddy current. Keller's body had washed up near a fishing pier 10 miles from the warehouse. The coroner's van was already there, along with Sandoval and 2 agents from Grace's team. Sandoval greeted us with a nod. "He didn't drown right away," he said quietly. "Probably hit his head on the piling. There was cash in his pockets, soaked and ruined. And this." He handed me a small rusted key sealed in an evidence bag. "What's it for?" I asked. "Storage unit," he said. under an alias registered to a Richard Alvarez. Emily's brow furrowed. The same man Keller was working for. Sandoval nodded. Grace is already pulling the warrant. We'll open it within the hour. When the lock finally clicked open, the smell of dust and damp metal filled the air. Inside were boxes, hundreds of them, stacked in neat rows labeled with dates and initials. On top of one box sat a small tin frame. I reached for it. It was a photograph of Helen Younger smiling beside Janet at what looked like a fundraising gala. Emily stared at it. "Mom and Janet," she whispered. "They look so happy." I felt a hollow ache in my chest. "Before all this," I said softly. "Before greed changed everything." Sandoval lifted one of the boxes and opened it. Inside were ledgers, USB drives, handwritten notes, the full record of every transaction Keller had ever made for Alvarez and Janet. The paper trail stretched back years, maybe decades. Emily ran her hand across the boxes. "Grace will need all of this." "Yes," I said, "but not before we look for one thing." "What thing?" "The reason Keller kept this photo." She frowned. "You think he knew Mom, or wanted her trust?" I said. "Maybe that's where it started." We searched through the first few boxes. Most were filled with financial records and offshore codes. But in one wrapped in a plastic sleeve, we found a handwritten letter addressed to H. Langston. The ink was faded, but the signature at the bottom was unmistakable Janet's. Emily read it aloud, her voice trembling. "Helen, the investment is safe now. Keller says the returns will double by next quarter. Don't worry, Edward never needs to know." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. Helen knew. Emily looked at me, her eyes wide. "You mean Mom was part of it?" "Not part of this," I said slowly. "She thought she was protecting us. But Janet must have convinced her to hide the accounts through Keller's firm. When Mom died, Janet inherited access, and she used it." Emily sank against the wall. "So all of this, every piece started with a lie they told each other." I nodded. "And Keller turned it into a weapon." Sandoval closed the box. "We'll take it all from here. But you should keep the letter. It's yours." That night back in Houston, I sat alone in my study, with Helen's letter spread across the desk. The handwriting was unmistakable, graceful, confident, familiar. I read it again and again until the words blurred into memory. Maybe she really thought she was doing the right thing. Maybe she never knew what Janet would turn it into. Emily came to the doorway. "Dad, you should sleep." "I will," I said quietly. "In a minute." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "You can stop fighting now. It's over." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the old family album where Helen's photo used to sit. "No," I said, "it's finished. But it'll never be over." Emily frowned. "What do you mean? Because stories like this don't end with courtrooms or confessions. They end when we remember what we almost lost and choose not to repeat it." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll do." As she left, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, and the night was quiet again. I closed my eyes, hearing Helen's voice in memory, soft, warm, steady. "When the truth comes, it won't roar. It will whisper." She'd been right. The truth didn't arrive like thunder. It came quietly through the smallest details, a file, a voice, a daughter's return. And sometimes that quiet truth changes everything. 2 weeks later, I stood in the boardroom of Piedmont Energy Bank for the first time in months. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows, reflecting off the polished mahogany table. Around it sat the directors' faces I'd known for decades, some older, some newer, all waiting for me to speak. Grace was there too, seated quietly at the end, her notes stacked neatly beside her. Patricia Williams, the chairwoman, cleared her throat. Edward, thank you for coming. We've reviewed the findings from the Keller investigation. Your evidence was decisive. The board has formally reinstated you as senior advisor to the trust division. I nodded, though the title meant little now. Thank you, Patricia. I didn't do this for reinstatement. Patricia smiled faintly. I know. You did it to protect what this bank once stood for. Richard Hayes, another old colleague, leaned forward. The press is calling it the Langston scandal. They want interviews, statements, television segments. You could use this moment to reshape the bank's image. I don't want headlines, I said. I want accountability. Patricia gestured toward Grace. And you'll have it. The SEC and DOJ are pursuing full charges against Atlantic Trust. Alvarez has agreed to testify in exchange for leniency, and Janet Langston's assets have been seized pending sentencing. Grace added quietly. She's facing up to 20 years, though her health might shorten that. I nodded. She'll have plenty of time to think. The room went silent for a moment. Then Patricia spoke again. Edward, I know this has been personal, but I also know you. You don't stop halfway. What do you plan to do next? I looked around at the faces of people who had once doubted me. People who had watched Caroline, then Laura, try to push me aside. I plan to rebuild what was broken. Not just the bank, but the trust, the word itself. Somewhere along the way, we started valuing efficiency over loyalty metrics, over relationships. That's why this happened. Because people stopped believing that integrity mattered. Richard smiled ruefully. You sound like Helen. I smiled too. That's the best compliment I've had all year. When the meeting ended, Grace walked with me to the elevator. You know, she said, you could retire now. Sell the rest of your shares, move somewhere quiet. Oregon, maybe. I chuckled. Funny you mentioned that. Emily did too. She's a smart woman, Grace said. You raised her well. I think she raised herself, I replied. But she reminded me of something important, that peace isn't the absence of problems. It's what you build after you face them. Grace pressed the elevator button. For what it's worth, Edward, you handled this better than most. Quiet, strategic, no unnecessary noise. The kind of justice that lasts. Quiet's the only way I know how, I said. That afternoon, I drove to the old church cemetery outside the city. The rain had washed the air clean, and sunlight spilled over the gravestones like gold leaf. I stopped by Helen's grave, the same spot I'd stood countless times before. But today felt different. I knelt down, brushing a few leaves off the granite. It's done, I said softly. Keller's gone, Janet's paying her dues, and Laura's finally facing the truth. You'd have liked Grace, smart, steady, no ego. She reminded me of you. The wind stirred cool and gentle. I smiled faintly. Emily's back too. She's everything you hoped she'd be, stronger, wiser, calmer than I ever was. She's working with the DOJ now, helping them trace other fraud networks. Says she wants to use what she learned for good. I paused, looking at the carved letters of Helen's name. You were right all along, you know. About patience, about quiet strength, about how truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. For a long moment I stayed there, listening to the soft rustle of the trees. Then I stood and turned toward the parking lot. Emily was waiting by the car, arms crossed, smiling. Talking to Mom again. Always, I said. She nodded. I think she'd tell you it's time to stop looking back. I smiled. She'd tell me that and then remind me I never listen. We drove into town for lunch at a small cafe near the river. The place was quiet, all warm wood and sunlight. Over soup and sandwiches, Emily told me about her new position with the DOJ's cybercrime division. It's strange, she said. All those years studying security, and it took a family disaster for me to figure out what I really wanted to do. That's how life works, I said. We grow through the wreckage. She looked at me, her eyes soft. And you? What now? I stirred my coffee. I think I'll start teaching again. Not in a classroom, maybe mentorship. The younger bankers could use a few lessons about what really matters. Trust, she asked. And listening, I said. 2 things you can't automate. Emily smiled. Mom would love that. As we ate, I noticed the world outside moving slower than usual. People walking under the bright sky, no rush, no chaos. For the first time, I realized I wasn't living in reaction anymore. I was living in choice. When we finished, we walked along the riverbank. The water shimmered in the sunlight, and the air smelled faintly of honeysuckle. Emily slipped her arm through mine. You know, I used to think you were unshakable, she said. Then I saw you scared, broken even, and somehow you were still standing. I think that's real strength. I looked at her, smiling. No, that's survival. Strength is what comes after. She nodded. Maybe both. We stopped at the railing, watching a heron skim across the surface of the water. Do you ever think about forgiving them? She asked quietly. Sometimes, I admitted. But forgiveness isn't for them. It's for me. I just haven't decided if I'm ready to let go of the lesson. Emily squeezed my arm. Then keep the lesson. Just don't keep the pain. The simplicity of her words hit me harder than I expected. I nodded slowly. I'll try. As we turned back toward the car, my phone buzzed again, a message from Grace. Janet's plea deal finalized. She's cooperating fully. Alvarez sentenced next week. I put the phone away. It's done, I said. Emily smiled. Really done this time? I looked out at the bright river, the calm wind, the long stretch of peace ahead. Yes, I said. This time I think it's finally over. That night back home, I sat in my study one last time. The notebooks, the recordings, the evidence, all neatly packed in a box, labeled closed. I opened the drawer where Helen's letter still rested, unfolded it, and read it again. Edward, if you're reading this, it means the world we built is changing faster than we ever planned. Promise me one thing. When everything falls apart, stay kind. That's the part they can't take from you. I folded the letter and placed it back in the drawer. I kept that promise, I whispered. Outside, the city was quiet. The rain clouds were gone, replaced by a sky full of stars. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something bad to happen. The past had spoken. The truth had settled. And in the silence that followed, life began again slowly, quietly, beautifully, just the way Helen would have wanted. 3 months later, the world looked almost normal again. The headlines had faded, the lawyers stopped calling, and the house finally felt like a home instead of a war zone. The Langston name, once dragged through scandal and suspicion, had been quietly restored to what it used to mean: steadiness, trust, legacy. But I knew better than to believe in normal. After everything, normal was just another kind of silence. The mornings became a ritual. Coffee on the porch, sunlight over the wet grass, and the faint hum of life returning to its rhythm. Emily had moved into her own apartment downtown, close to the DOJ office where she now worked. She visited every Sunday, bringing fresh bread or flowers, always asking if I was eating well, sleeping enough, letting go. I lied about all 3. Grace still called from time to time, mostly updates Janet's sentence finalized at 14 years. Alvarez stripped of his corporate holdings Laura in a halfway house after agreeing to testify. Grace said she thought Laura might actually rebuild her life someday. I hoped she was right, though I doubted it. Some damage runs too deep for rebuilding. That morning, I sat at my desk and opened the family trust portal one last time. The screen was clean, no alerts, no threats, no red warnings. I transferred a small sum to a new account in Emily's name, one she didn't know about yet. It wasn't a gift. It was an insurance policy, something Helen would have done. Quiet safety. Quiet love. Around noon, I drove to the edge of town, where Helen and I used to spend weekends, a small lakeside park with cypress trees that dipped their roots into the water. The air smelled of pine and rain. I walked the trail slowly, the wooden planks creaking under my feet. At the far end of the boardwalk, I stopped where the path opened into a view of the lake. The surface was still a mirror of soft gray sky. For a long time, I stood there thinking about the past year, the betrayals, the recordings, the endless nights of doubt and proof. It struck me how easy it is to mistake quiet for weakness, and how wrong that assumption can be. My phone buzzed. "A message from Emily. You up for dinner tonight? I'm making Mom's chili." I smiled, typing back. Wouldn't miss it. I slipped the phone into my pocket and watched the water ripple as a breeze passed through. Helen would have loved this, the calm after the storm, the balance returning. She always said justice wasn't about punishment. It was about restoration. I finally understood what she meant. That evening, I arrived at Emily's apartment just as the sun was setting. The place was small but warm, full of life. Photos on the wall, a record spinning in the corner, the smell of chili filling the air. She greeted me with a hug that lasted a little longer than usual. "Dad," she said, "you look different." "Older?" I asked. She laughed. "Lighter." We ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her work, the new cybercrime task force, how she was using our family's story to train investigators on recognizing internal manipulation schemes. "It's strange," she said. "Every time I give a lecture, I see someone in the crowd who looks like you, quiet, patient, underestimated. Those are the people who always end up changing everything." I raised an eyebrow. Changing everything or surviving everything? "Maybe both," she said, smiling. After dinner, we sat on the balcony with 2 cups of tea, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time, I realized that peace doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from understanding why you had to remember. Emily leaned her head against my shoulder. "You know, when I was younger, I used to think you were too calm, like nothing could shake you. And now I know calm isn't lack of emotion," she said. "It's control, the kind that takes years to earn." I looked at her and thought of all the storms she'd weathered, the lies, the fear, the weight of legacy. "Your mother would be proud," I said. "She'd be proud of both of us," Emily replied softly. When I got home that night, I went straight to my study. The box marked "closed" still sat on the shelf. I took it down, opened it, and looked at the contents one last time. The notebooks, the flash drive, the letter from Helen. I placed everything in a metal tin, sealed it, and carried it outside to the garden. The moon was high silver light spilling across the yard. I dug a small hole beneath the oak tree and buried the box there. Not to hide it, but to let it rest. To let me rest. When the soil was smooth again, I whispered, "It's done." The next morning, I woke before dawn. The air was cool and quiet, the kind of quiet that no longer felt heavy. I brewed coffee and stepped outside. The sky was pale pink, the start of another day. I thought about Helen, about Emily, about everything we'd survived, and how life, no matter how broken, always finds its balance again. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers through the people who refuse to give up. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying what hurt you. It's rebuilding what they tried to take. If you've ever stood where I stood, underestimated, betrayed but still breathing, then you already know. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means ready. Tell me, what would you do if the people you trusted the most turned against you? Would you walk away, or would you fight back the quiet way, with patience, truth, and time? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me your story. And if mine resonated with you, stay with us for the next one, because sometimes the quietest stories carry the loudest truths.